Welcome to this week's episode of the Exchange Zone podcast, the bridge between sports and life, where we talk to former collegiate, world-class, and professional athletes about the lessons they learned competing that they use in their life right now. Hey, welcome to the Exchange Zone podcast, the bridge between sports and life. We all know what the Exchange Zone is, but just in case you don't, is where this baton it's not dropped because champions don't drop the baton. If we drop the baton and we hear this noise, we are disqualified. And when we're disqualified, not only can we not win, we can't even complete the race. So do whatever we can to keep the baton moving. Today, we're excited to have a super guest, superb person, just an all-around great guy. I know Ivory Angello, but Ivory Angello, welcome to the Exchange Zone, man. We are happy to have you join with us today.
Thank you. I really do appreciate you inviting me to join the podcast. I've been looking forward to it.
Well, listen, we don't want to hold people's times. We know how valuable that time is. So, Ivory, as a former athlete, you still might compete. You still look like you in pretty good shape. But how did you get into athletics? You know, where did you start? Where did you end up going? What is your favorite sport? You know, just get us caught up to kind of you and your athletic history there.
Okay. Well, I started track and field in elementary, like some of the athletes. Started as a high jumper and just had a knack for jumping, to be honest with you. Grew up in Northeast Houston and in an area town that didn't really have much for people to do. And so school sports was an outlet for, people that come from where I'm from. And then they also utilize that as a way to get out of, the hood, per se, if what you want to call it. In elementary, I didn't really know that it was going to take me where I'm at today or it was going to take me to college. I just knew that when I started, I enjoyed it. And I just had a knack for jumping and started as a high jumper and went on to middle school, high jumped, ran the 800 in middle school, which, because I was tall, I guess they was like, okay, this guy, we're going to put him as a distance runner. But no, dude.
Crazy combination.
Yes, dead last at those track meets in the 800. But in the high jump, I was winning, So I was like, hey, coach, if you want me to put me in 800, I still run it. I'm going to do what you tell me to do. But I don't think that's my cup of tea,
Yeah.
Went on to high school, still as a high jumper. Started at MB Smiley. He was on their varsity track team as a freshman and did well. But, my father, wanted me to go to a school that focused on academics a little bit more than sports. So I left Barbara Jordan and I left MB Smiley and went to Barbara Jordan.
Okay.
Barbara Jordan didn't have any sports. So at that point, I thought that my athletic career would have been over. And, so I focused on academics. And just so happened that Barbara Jordan, since it doesn't have sports, it allows you to compete in sports for schools, I guess, that are in the HISD school district.
Okay.
And since I was coming from North Forest, I didn't have any ties to any schools in HISD. So in essence, I became a free agent. So it just so happened that was a guy named Trent that went to Sam Houston High School. And Trent knew me from my freshman year, when I was jumping at Smiley.
Right.
And he asked me, he was like, hey, what are you going to do? And I was like, dude, I have no idea. I was like, I guess my track and field career is over with. And he was like, I'm still running. And I was like, oh, really? And it was like, where? And he was like, over at Sam Houston. And I was like, huh. And so I was like, well, that sounds all good and fine and all this. I said, but dude, I don't have no car. How am I going to get to Sam Houston and then get home? He was like, let me talk to the coach. And so Coach Young, that was the coach that was over at Sam Houston, and I owe a lot to him. He has since passed on, but that guy right there was the one who changed the trajectory of my life.
Mm-hmm.
He brought me over to Sam Houston. He kind of heard what I did, at Smiley, and he was like, hey, this is what I'll do for you. I don't stay too far from you. Since I have to come up here and pick up my son, he had a son that went to Barbara Jordan and Trent. You can ride with them to practice, and then I'll bring you home every day. And I was like, huh, really?
Wow.
Yeah. So man, I rode with him to practice, and this was like my junior year in school. So at that point, I was like, I missed the whole season my sophomore year,
Right.
and it was kind of like, okay, I know you're a high jumper, but they got this new thing that's coming out called triple jump. And I was like, triple jump, dude, I ain't never heard of that. He was like, well, it's the first year we had it in the state of Texas. So if you want to try it out, here's some videos. I can't really show you what to do, but here go a couple videos, and
Yeah.
we're gonna try to figure it out. And then I was like, you know what? Okay, coach, I'll give it a try. Well, started triple jumping and did really good in triple jump there. Ended up going to state as a junior. Got third place behind Henry Neal, who
Oh
was
yeah.
a big time name in the 100 meters. But Henry, first guy in Texas to go over 50 feet. And then
Yeah.
we had named Ron Jones. I think that's his last name, Ron Jones from Dallas. He ended up getting second, so I got third. And I'm a very competitive person. And I was like, that'll be the last time I get third place in triple jump at a state meet.
Yeah.
So going into my senior year, which went undefeated till I got to regionals. Well, actually, take that back. No, I think I fouled out in regionals my junior year, and then so I didn't make it to state my senior year.
Okay.
And like, oh my God, I thought the world was coming to an end. But by that time, I'd already pretty much been the number one jumper in the state of Texas. And all of the colleges were recruiting me, and it was just kind of like, okay, you had a mishap, in a triple jump, and we gonna kind of look past that. And so end up going on. No, take that back. I think I ended up getting like second, or did I win state my senior year? I'm gonna have to check that. I have to go back into
Okay. Okay. You
my
get
little.
we'll invite you back to clarify.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and remember that because I remember going to state twice. I went twice, and I think I may have won my senior year
Okay.
because I know I tried in the long jump, and I also tried in the high jump. I didn't make state in the high jump, but I did make it in the long jump, and so didn't do very well because long jump was just long jump. I was just doing that to have fun, and then we was running the 4x1, so I went to state in the 4x1 as well, and I actually ran anchor, and there was a guy that I ran against from Jasper, Texas, named Brian Brunson, who ended up later one of my teammates and one of the best 400-meter hurdlers in the world, and also becoming an Olympian. And I was just kind of like, didn't know it at the time, but that was it. And then also met you while I was in high school. We competed against each other as well.
That's right.
And so got a scholarship, to go on to Rice University, and got to Rice and was like, it was a whole nother arena, going in, doing indoors, jumping on boards,
Yeah.
and the dynamic of that, the way it sounds when your feet hit the ground. And my very first track meet, I kind of got a little bit scared, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
There's a guy named James Colbert that went to University of Texas, and he was a power jumper. And when his feet hit the ground, it just made this thunderous noise, and I'd never heard that before.
Yeah.
And he almost psyched me out, but I was like, I'm not going to let that happen. And I hate to call James out, on the podcast, but I ended up beating him by like 3 feet at that same track meet, and he never beat me. So it was just kind of like sometimes you can't let people get in your head because sometimes that
Yeah.
bluff is what it is. It's a bluff.
Yeah.
So later on, I kind of use that to my advantage. Sometimes you got to do a little posturing to get in their head in order to win. But as a freshman, I went on to go to NCs as a freshman. I do believe I made All American as a freshman. My sophomore year, I was injured.
Okay.
One indoors, I got second place. No, I get second. No, I won. I got second place outdoor conference as a freshman. My junior year, I won indoors and I got third place because I had a hamstring injury. My coach was going to try to redshirt me, and I told him, I said, no, I think that I could still win even though I was injured, and I ended up getting third behind a guy, Chris Lopez, and another gentleman from University of Houston. And if you know me, that's the last time you're gonna ever beat me. And
Yeah. 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 We can't wait to get to that part.
yeah, very
This
competitive.
competition. Yeah.
Yeah, and so needless to say, still end up making to NCs that year. Did okay. Then came back my junior year, won indoors, won outdoors. Came back my senior year, won indoors, won outdoors. Went to NCs at one point. I know I was a silver medalist indoors 1 year, outdoors. I made All American. I was like five-time conference champion. The times that I didn't win, I got a silver and a bronze. At NCs, I was three-time All American. And then I went on to the professional ranks. Got my first contract with Asics Tiger Corporation. Although I was really a Reebok person. I'd worn Reebok since middle school. But when you go to become a professional athlete, you're chasing that dollar at that
Yeah.
point.
Right. Right.
And so I followed the advice of my agents and signed on with Asics Tiger Corporation. And then made a couple world championship teams in triple jump and did the Olympic trials in '96, had a heel bruise. So it seems like sometimes when it comes to these big meets, I have some type of injury. But at the U.S. Championships in '95, I was a silver medalist. I got beat by Mike Powell. I'm sorry, Mike Conley,
I
who is
count. Yeah. Yeah.
he's a and so he beat me by 1 inch on his last jump. I was winning the entire meet, and he beat me. He beat me by that 1 inch on his last jump, and I said if I was going to lose, I'm going to lose to the goat. You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
we went on from there and ended up, qualifying for those world championship teams, and had a good career until injury took me out of it. Messed up a nerve in my calf after I came back from World Championships in Paris. Was just running down the runway, popped up, landed in the sand wrong, came down and crunched my knee, and at that point didn't really know that my career was going to be over. But I was sitting on the sidelines, and to be honest with you, initially didn't hurt. It wasn't until I tried to stand up that the pain kicked in.
Oh
Then got
man.
to the training room and found out I had nerve damage, and that took a little over a year to kind of get back to a point where my leg would fire properly, because as long as I'm doing things slow, my leg would function properly. But anytime I would do any type of fast twitch, it would just go dead. It's like the signal would disconnect from my brain and the leg would just go limp.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so it took over a year for that to reconnect and for me to learn how to use that leg properly. And then I fell down and broke my arm. So at that point, I was like, you know what, the man upstairs is saying, man, it's time for you to get a real job,
Yeah.
you know. And it had been almost 2 years, that I was still come back and chase that, because I was going to try back for the 2000 Olympics, because the '96 Olympics, I felt like I should have made that team, because I was on that world championship to team after. And then I had a tremendous indoor season going into the world championships. And it was just like, like when you're that young, you don't ever think that your career is going to get cut that short. But one thing I did learn that I should have got that elite athlete insurance, and insured my legs and insured my body, which, back then they weren't making the kind of money that they're making now. But
Right.
being my young athlete, once you become an elite athlete, do get some insurance on your body, because injuries is the number one thing that take athletes out of sports. Some people think it's potentially drugs or, something. No, it's injuries. You have a lot of talented people who stop competing because of injury. And
Wow.
so, after that, I went on into the transportation industry. My mom was a truck driver, and she was the
Okay.
one who introduced me to my first company, which was a company called Conway Southern Express,
Oh yeah.
which is BO. I started in their management training program and then moved up the ranks with them, um, until I went to outside sales for them. And then I started working for another company, got recruited by a company called Watkins Motor Lines, because I was banging heads with them at every account. And so I guess they was like, hey, let's bring this guy on board.
Yeah.
So recruited to come on board to Watkins. And same situation happened with my current company, ABF. I took Watkins, my territory, and increased it tremendously, and was banging heads against ABF. And ABF was like, let's bring him on board. And that's the thing. Whenever you're out there doing what you need to do, other people take notice, and they always want you a part of their team. And this was my first time ever working for a union carrier, so I had some hesitancies But I made the jump. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse, the Godfather deal, and came on board. And I've been there now 23 years.
Wow.
I've
Wow.
worked in pretty much every capacity that you've worked. I've been in local sales. I've been in corporate sales. I've been in branch management. I've been a director, and now I'm a senior manager. In process compliance. So it's almost what I do is I go in and make sure people are following corporate SOPs. So making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, based on the guidelines that are set forth by the corporation.
Wow. That's a great story, great segue, great thing for all young and athletes to understand that there is life after sports. You have to
Yeah.
be prepared to take that. But one of the things that you've talked about, you've mentioned one of the threads through this is this competitiveness. So
Mhm.
uh, you've always been competitive.
Always. I'm still
Oh,
competitive.
okay. So let's talk about the competitive now. So what is it that you've taken from your jumping days when you were competitive that you use now in in corporate America?
Find I find the bar of whatever position I'm in and I try to raise it to a point that they're no longer talking about the person that was doing that same position. Now they're talking about me. So I do.
That same triple jump philosophy.
Yes.
I'm not gonna be behind anybody.
Nobody. And my goal at Rice was to make it into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And I put it in the Hall and I wanted to break every record they had. I broke the indoor record and I broke the outdoor record and it still stands. And that record's been I mean, I broke that record and it was there since the 70s. And I broke it the first time I broke it as a freshman and I just kept extending it
Yeah.
until the time graduating. It's still so and at ABL.
So what motivates you? I mean, I know you're ultra competitive, but what in track you had you could measure jumps, you
Mhm.
had standards to go to NCs, you had standards to make the trials, you knew where people stood. But what about now? What did you use then? What motivates you? What drives you? What pushes you?
um, Opening a pathway for folks that have to come behind me,
Okay.
because I work in the industry where you don't really see people of color in senior
Okay.
management. And so I
Okay.
want to make sure that I kind of open the doors for them and do a good job so that when they're coming in, they don't have to worry about that stigma that comes along with that because I'm working in transportation. You have people who are truck drivers, people that work on the dock. Some of them are not degreed individuals. And so, a lot of people, the first time they meet someone in the transportation and logistics industry, it's a truck driver,
Right.
and so depending on how that exchange goes, they can formulate some type of opinion. And so I want to make sure that that's always a positive experience whenever they meet me. And then from a personal standpoint, we all work because we have bills, and so
Yeah.
if there's a bonus that I can try to attain and hit, that's what I'm going for. I'm looking for that monetary reward as well.
Okay. So that's a good that's a great motivator.
Hmm.
Always chasing that lifestyle.
Yeah, what my wife used to say is when my daughter was younger, my baby liked Borettes. So I got to make sure I make some dollars so I can keep paying for Borettes for my daughter.
That's that's that is that is a great motivator, and that
Yeah,
that keeps us
yeah.
going, keep pushing us, keep doing that. Hey, you mentioned Coach Young back
Coach,
in high school.
yep.
Uh, what are some things that he taught you then, or that whether it was intentional, unintentional lessons that you picked up from him that you use now that's helped you in your professional career?
Don't be afraid to change.
Okay.
Because I was a high jumper, and they had triple jump. Although I was a high jumper, he was like, okay, I see some value that I think that you may like this event, and
Yeah.
ultimately end up getting me a scholarship. And then also he put me on the 4x1. I wasn't known as a sprinter, but
Mhm.
he need to start developing my foot speed. And then a lot of people don't realize that Rice, I ran on the relay a couple times, and at conference, they even let me be the anchor. And I actually ran away from Kareem Street Thompson, which is a world class 100-meter runner. I ran out of the exchange zone, like you talked about a little bit earlier, and
Qualified. Yeah.
we finished the race. But in my mind, to be honest with you, I started to just keep on running, even without the stick, because that pride thing stepped in. But I wanted to, in my mind, I really still want to show folks that, hey, I can still hang with these guys, even though I'm a jumper. And they was a bit disappointed. And that taught me a big lesson. Don't run out of the exchange zone, and don't get overzealous when it comes to things. Sometimes you got to take your time. There it is, right there.
Yeah.
So yeah. But that's what Coach Young taught me. Don't be afraid to change. Because sometimes you get more blessings by being a chameleon and changing your color. Sometimes you don't always have to be green. Sometimes it's better to be brown.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've talked about a lot about transition, how you went from high jump to triple jump. You did some long jump, did some sprinting, but even inside sales, outside sales, project management, all
Hmm.
of that type of flexibility, that type of versatility, that type of it had to be some things that you picked up
Oh yeah.
from the competition days that helped you
Yes.
navigate some of this stuff.
Yes, 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 yes. I mean, you from being a competitor, there are a lot of non-spoken cues that you kind of pick up on, non-verbal cues, because you have to learn how to read your competition.
Okay.
Goes into business as well. When I first started at Conway, I did inside sales. And so I had to learn how to put people at ease over the telephone. So pick up some of those non-visual cues by just listening to people, the
Yeah.
inflection in their voice. Before I was able to go to outside sales, I think that made me a better salesman because I paid attention, to not only to what they were displaying, but what they were saying. So sometimes what you display can disconnect from what you're saying. So if you're really paying
Yeah.
attention, you'll know where that disconnect happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess inside sales will teach you how to, there's a difference between hearing and listening. And
Right.
so
Exactly.
actually listening and understanding and I'm sure the same thing, with when you were competing, you figured out
Right.
with teammates, one way may be faster. So you hear, okay, hey, is this one quicker or slower? Or,
Right. Exactly.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
With even with jumping, before the event ever started, everyone did a lot of posturing on the runway. Like we would take short approaches, see who can jump the furthest in the pit,
Yeah.
and then you put a real big one way out there just to mess with people.
Yeah.
Even you ain't hit the board, you just fouled, but it's still good that you landed way in the sand, especially when you can get the spectators doing the ooh and the ahs, and then get them clapping and get that adrenaline rush going. And that was a big thing. And I really enjoyed competition. Pressure didn't bother me because during our practice, I trained on a track with a bunch of world class athletes, and so some of our practices were
Good.
more competitive than the actual events. So by the time I got to an event, I was already used to training at a certain level, and so I competed at that same level. So that was another lesson that I took with me from track and field. The way you train is the way you're going to compete.
The preparation part
Yeah, yeah.
of this. So now when you get into the workplace,
Hmm. Yep.
whatever you're doing, you already know how to
Hmm. Exactly.
prepare
You
because
put
you're taking.
those same scenarios. You go in, you try to figure out, okay, what questions are these people going to ask me? You already have a series of different answers already prepared. It's just like, okay, which trigger am I going to pull depending on which answer they or which question they ask.
Yeah.
So you learn those little nuances, and that's where you learn that over time with experience. Because a new person coming in, especially in my industry, um, there's a lot of catchphrases that people use, and there's a lot of scenarios that new reps coming in or new managers come in that they've never been faced with. Whereas a seasoned person be like, oh, you can fix that by doing A, B, C, D. Well, a new person, that's just the end of the world to them because they've never faced any adversity like that. So you just have to kind of talk them off the ledge and tell them, hey, the world's not going to end. Just take a step back, breathe for a second, and reapproach it.
Well, that's a good. I do want to come back to adversity in just a second. But one of the things you talk about with new people coming in, and how do you build trust in a team? How do you establish that type of, because if you're competitive, then that means everybody around you has to be ready to win. So
Hmm.
how do you build trust and unity within a team to create the culture or establish the culture that you are accustomed to or that you want?
Well, couple things I do. I try to find some commonality.
Okay.
With me being a former athlete, I try to find folks that are into sports, and so we try to bond over sports. So that's one thing that I do. It kind of takes their mind away from business and makes it a little bit more personal.
Yeah.
And they will open up a little bit more. They may not let you completely in, but they will let the fence down a little bit.
Yeah.
And then another thing is that I will do is I will show anyone on my team that I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty, because you have a lot of folks that go into management that will not model the behavior that they want people to do, meaning that if I'm going to go in and tell a guy to go in, let's say if I'm on a dock, I need you to go into that trailer and do this. I'm not afraid to go into that trailer with them and help them if they will allow. I work in a union environment where they don't allow us to advance certain things. But when I worked in a non-union environment, we could just jump on a forklift like anyone else and kind of help.
Yeah.
Or, if got a guy that's struggling, he's going off an errand with a long box. Hey man, help that guy out, so that you don't get hurt. Help pick up one end, help pick up the slack. And
Yeah.
then you building a bit of rapport with them. And then in the union environment, there's always, well, I can't say there's always, in certain facilities you go to, there's management on one side and there's a union on the other side, and sometimes those two sides are always at odds. Well, I try to break down that wall to tell them, hey, we all work for the same company.
Right.
Your paycheck has the same
Right.
name on it that my paycheck has on it. I just applied for a different job. So ultimately the goal is for us is to get whatever job we have to get done today completed
Yeah.
through from the start of operation to the end of the operation, or to just get it continued until someone comes in and relieves you and leave it better than you found it. And
Yes.
then don't start the us versus them um,
We.
scenario, because I'm not about that. My mother was a driver. And so I tell them all the time, hey, if I treat you bad, I expect someone to treat my mother bad. And she does the same thing that you do. So I'm not going to treat you in a way that I would want someone to mistreat my mother. So, and when I tell them about that, that typically opens it up.
That helps. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to get back to is this idea of struggle. You've talked about heels, you've talked about nerves in the calves, and then you every day is not uh every day is not peaches and cream. Every day is not peak performance. Every day is not
No,
optimal. Uh,
nope.
how do you overcome the struggles now? You've over athletically you had to deal with it, but what happens in the workplace now that you can use some of that stuff to help you overcome when everything is not going optimally or peak like we want it?
Sometimes you have to go back in and see, okay, am I following the processes? Because sometimes it could be an SOP issue. You tried to skirt the system and do something. You didn't follow the A, B, C, D, E steps in line. You went A to C, and then back to B, and then to F. You jumped around. And if
Yeah,
you went A, B, C, D, you probably would have got the winning result that you wanted.
yeah,
And or sometimes you don't know A leads to B, that leads to C, leads to D. So you have to find a mentor, find someone that has gone through it and have conversations with them. And don't be afraid to humble yourself and say, hey, dude, I just don't know.
right.
I need help. And then that's another thing in corporate America that a lot of people are scared to do is say that they need help, because they feel that if I say I'm going to need help, ultimately they may think that they're going to be replaced by the person that helps them, or they're going to feel that you are not competent enough to do the job that you're in. But they don't realize that everyone has been in your shoes at some point. Everyone is learning that same lesson that you're learning right now. And if you build a network or build a team, you know,
Yeah.
they'll, they'll make your job a lot easier. That's the biggest thing that I had to learn being in management, was actually how to manage, because I was
Wow.
so doing everything myself and not allowing people to do the work that they're assigned to do, that if they didn't do it the way I wanted it, I would just jump in and do it for them, which is not teaching them and not training them. So
Right.
that was a big thing that I truly had to do. My wife pointed that out a lot, that I can't control people.
Right.
And I had to learn how to let go and to start truly managing versus doing.
Wow. Wow. That's good. And when you're that competitive, yes, I'll just go do it myself. I'm not used to relying on anybody. But one of the things you mentioned that I think we all have to realize is that in sports and in life, especially in sports that can transfer to life, is
Mhm.
we always had coaches, and it's
Right.
okay to have a coach. And
Yeah.
you might not understand why Coach Yang, or Coach Young, or Coach Straub, or had you
Yeah.
doing certain
Yep.
things,
Yep.
but it
Yep.
always paid off later. So if we
Yeah.
can get to establishing the trust and understanding that it's okay to lean on somebody,
Yes.
that's okay. So now you mentioned your daughter. So what would you tell her about athletics that you wish you had known then?
Well, I'm telling her stuff right now because she is now in competitive volleyball. She's in high school, and she also plays club volleyball. So she's playing on the national level at 14 years old. And the thing that I tell her now that I wish someone would have, well, I guess they did tell me back then, but maybe I was hard headed, didn't listen,
Yeah.
was repetition, repetition, repetition. Um, Train the way you want to compete. We naturally did it, with the group
Right.
that we had,
Right.
but never pointed that out. It was
Right.
just it was just a matter of fact. We just did it just because that was the environment we were in. But no one really pointed out that, hey, do you want to jump sloppy?
Right.
Keep sloppy.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you want to and improve yourself, dude, you need to push yourself till I'm quoting James Brown, my fibers are burning. If you remember that story.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you got to push yourself to a point where you feel like my body is going to break down and I can't go no further. Well, at that point, you have just elevated your game
Right.
because now body has gone into shock, and now it knows what it feels like, and now how you respond to that shock will take you to the next level. And that's the one thing that I push her. I don't want to hear I'm tired. Okay, now how are you going to perform when you're tired? Because when you're tired, that's when your technique kicks in.
Right.
And if you start using poor technique when you're tired, when you compete, you're definitely going to use poor technique because you're going to run back, you're going to fall back to what your habits are.
Ooh, yeah. Yes. Yes. And then one of the things I appreciate about you is you've built one heck of a network uh, through
I
sport.
tried. I
I
tried.
mean, you rattling off names. I know you keep in touch with
Oh
people,
yeah.
and
Oh
you
yeah.
call out stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
and one of the things that we also learn is how important the network is
Yes.
and what we're doing. We're never getting an opportunity to see some of those types of caliber of people
Hmm. Hmm.
in life. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I,
good
I
stuff.
still go to track meets and I still, socialize with everybody. When I see them, I speak to everybody. That was the one thing that anybody who ever competed against me they will 100% say that I was aggressive to compete against, but I was friendly when we weren't competing, and I was your biggest fan when you were competing against me as well. Because if you competed well, that pushed me to compete well is also because if you PR'd and you beat me, that means that okay, I need to come back and beat you because that's going to push me to
Right.
make it better.
Yeah.
Because if you're always in the front and never have anyone to kind of tell you, you don't know what your
Wait,
potential
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like even in whenever they're trying to set a world record in the quarter to 800 or what have you, there's always a rabbit out there.
Right.
And I want somebody to be a rabbit every time I'm competing so that I can push myself to that next level.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about track and field, and I've seen you do it and you just mentioned it, but we can compete and collaborate. And that's
Yes.
one of the things that's also gone over into the workplace, this idea of we can compete. Yeah, I want to beat you, but
Hmm.
we can still we can shake hands afterwards and say, good job. See you
Right.
next time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That makes the team stronger. I mean,
That's
iron sharpens iron, as they say.
that's right. Iron sharp as iron. Speaking of iron, okay, let's get to some quick steps, a couple quick things before we get out of here. What is
Sure.
one word that describes how sports shape you?
Resilience. So I will say it made me resilient because I went through a lot, going from elementary, middle school to college to becoming a professional. And it just taught me don't ever give up. Just be resilient. Just keep going because you never know where it's going to take you.
Great.
So I think being resilient, that's the one thing that I took from sports.
I like that. If if somebody spent a day with you, what would
Mhm.
they be surprised? What would they be most surprised about?
The thing that they would be most surprised about is my love of food. I love to eat. I talk about food constantly, and they're gonna be like, dude, you need to be a food critic because like you don't just order off the menu. You want to tweak everything that you order. You want them to put a little extra this. And
Yeah.
my coworkers say the same thing. Whenever they come around me, they be like, dang, dude, you can eat. And they don't ever want me to order first because they was like, oh no, he's gonna take his time. So yeah, go ahead and get the order.
Okay, okay. The
Do me.
foodie in you. Okay, okay.
Foodie, dude. That is
That's good. What is a quote or a mantra that you live by today?
that's a very good one. The quote mantra I live by: it takes a winner to come from behind. And I do
Ooh. Say
uh,
that again. Slow it down for the people in the back.
yeah, it takes a winner to come from behind. And I want to say that's a Prefontaine quote. Uh,
Okay.
because I watched Prefontaine movie or something years and years ago.
Yeah.
And he came back, he didn't lead the pack, but is that grit
Yeah.
that endured to win from coming from behind. And I was like, you know what? That's deep. And I was like, you know what? That is so, so true.
It does. It
Um,
does.
that that is my mantra. It takes a winner to come from behind.
I like that. I like that.
The
All right,
person,
one last one, then we gonna get out of here. Your playlist. Now
okay.
you had a playlist then. Is it different now?
Oh, I still like the genre of music, but my theme song back in the day, Mo Bounce to the Ounce, Zapping Rogers. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that was whenever I would go to track meets, we'd have those headphones on, and I was always playing Zapping Rogers. And to this day, whenever I get myself hyped, I still play that 70s music. Zapping Rogers is still my thing. And
yeah.
even my daughter, I video a lot of her volleyball events and I try to set it to music. And I do a little crisscross, make you jump, jump with her because that's a little bit more current. So,
Crisscross is more current. I guess it's more current
well, I
than
mean, for
70.
her, it's not current for her, but it's more current for
It's
me.
current for you. Yo,
Oh, some Cypress Hill, jump around.
jump, jump.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Look, don't get me started. Man,
just
listen, I enjoyed your hours. Is there anything that you want to share with us that I may have missed?
No, I mean, I'll kind of go back to that story. I said my fibers are burning. My fibers are burning. So I'm gonna give y'all a little insight. So James Brown, who I'm talking to right now, he's on the track, and I don't know if we were running quarters or running 200s, but
Probably
it
quarters.
was time trials. James, he's out there running with Kareem, running with Brian Brunson, running with Chris Jones, running with Gabriel Luke, and these are some of the fastest guys in the world. Y'all finish that 400 or that 200. James lays down on the track and said, my fibers are burning. My fibers are burning. My fibers are burning. And man, I died laughing and rolling because if you've ever pushed yourself to that limit, you know exactly what that feels like.
Yes. Yeah.
Not a good feeling. It is like having a leg cramp all up and down your legs, but your legs is not cramped up. They just
They just they on fire.
they
You
on
are
fire.
burning. Yes.
You can't do nothing but just wait for that to subside. Ain't nothing you can do.
Nothing at all.
Yeah, and I still say that. I said, if your fibers ain't burning, you ain't pushed
You
through it.
haven't pushed.
For me and James, you definitely went out there and you pushed through the pain a lot.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So
Yeah. Whew. Taking me
yes,
back, making me hot. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. Jump.
there
Jump.
you go. There you go. There you go. There you
Hey man, look, I enjoyed our time, Ivory, man. This has been absolutely phenomenal. We thank you for tuning in to the Exchange Zone podcast. Remember, champions don't drop the baton. We'll see you
yes,
next time. Ivory, appreciate you.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.